Today's topic, our newest and one of our most exciting trips, Antarctica, the last continent, where we're going to be heading to in January of 2025. A lot of our members have asked us about this trip for a while, and we finally came around to putting it together. And I'll explain how we got here in a few minutes. But before I do that, for those of you who are new to Wheel and Anchor, I just want to take a minute to indulge you in what we are all about and how we differentiate ourselves from sort of regular tour companies. So for those of you who've heard this 100 times, please just bear with me for the next minute. Wheel and Anchor is a community of travelers from all across Canada. I started this. I've been organizing trips for Canadians for 33 years this year, quite a long time. And what I discovered in all of the trips that I've organized over the many decades, that when you have a group of people who have a like-minded sense of traveling, of discovery, of adventure, of culinary tastes, just what it's like when you're around travelers like that. You have something in common. You have something to share and talk about. And although one could say that about any tour group, there is a special dynamic. There is a special sense of belonging that people at Wheel and Anchor have, and that's really what we're all about, is bringing people together for these amazing experiences to become well-traveled, well-connected, following our philosophy of travel, which is generally slower travel. It's generally designed to have you really get in touch with local people that you might meet along the way, as well as your fellow travelers, at a pace that is just more sensible and allows you time to appreciate the things that you see along the way, and allows you time to do stuff on your own. It's one of the biggest comments and feedback that we get on trips and other trips in general, and sometimes even our trips, because we're constantly tweaking things, but that to allow time for exploration, for doing stuff on your own and not just filling every single day from 8 a.m. till 6 p.m. It's not how we roll. So that's a little bit about Wheel and Anchor. And of course, if you ever have any questions about that, you're welcome to speak to any of our team members. And on that note, I'd like to introduce those to you, starting with myself. My name is Gordon Dreger. I'm the founder of Wheel and Anchor. As I say, I've been doing this for a long time. I've brought Canadians and folks from all over the world to all other kinds of places all over the world. And so together with my team, and in particular, I want to mention Barb and Paula, our trip specialists, who are the ones that answer all your questions, make sure that you have the information that you need to enable you to join us on our trips. So, and then we have a much wider team that is involved in the coordination and the execution of all of our trips. And I'm not going to get into all of that, but you've got the key people here right in front of you. And so today, as per usual, we are going to go to one place that will really, as it says here, it'll alter the way that you perceive the world. Antarctica is like no other place. There are sure there's similarities to the Arctic, and there's similarities to Spitsbergen and other northern reaches, but it is otherworldly, to put it mildly. And so I'm going to share with you why that is, and why it is that we're going to be going there, and how we're going to be going there in January of 2025. So first of all, let's look at the map. Of course, Antarctica, as you know, is this giant continent at the bottom of the world that encompasses, of course, the South Pole. And we often forget how big Antarctica is, because it is bigger than most other continents. Actually, it covers a huge landmass. Of course, Antarctica, as you'll know from high school geography, is land, as opposed to the Arctic, which is only an ice cap. And the part of Antarctica, a lot of Antarctica, you only see here on this map, the so-called Antarctic Peninsula, which is the northernmost piece of land that juts out of the Antarctic landmass as a whole. And so this is, for all intents and purposes, the only part of Antarctica that is generally navigable for sort of tourism purposes. There are a couple of other expedition icebreaker type programs that venture around Antarctica on very long voyages on relatively sort of ordinary like research type vessels, less comfortable. But the vast majority of visitors to Antarctica visit this area here called the Antarctic Peninsula and the South Shetland Islands. And for many reasons, this is also the most interesting part of Antarctica, first and foremost, because there are mountains, there are glaciers, there's beautiful navigable channels. Most of the rest of Antarctica is a big, giant sheet of ice. In any event, we start our journey by flying down to Buenos Aires. Actually, this map is missing a leg. I just realized, because we actually, oh no, it's not missing a leg. It's at the top. I just didn't see it correctly. So we're flying from Toronto, or from wherever you are in Canada, down to Buenos Aires. So there's a number of different connections. Unfortunately, there are no nonstop flights at the moment between Canada and Argentina. So there is a stop involved en route, depending on where it is in Canada that you're coming from. We'll gather in Buenos Aires, we'll have a night there, and then we'll fly down domestically from Buenos Aires down here to Tierra del Fuego, Fire Island or Fire Land, which is where Ushuaia is located. And this is the gateway to Antarctica. From Ushuaia, we'll spend a few days here because I've been to Antarctica a couple of times, and I've never really spent the time in Ushuaia, and there's so many interesting things to see here in this city that's at the end of the world. So we're going to include in a program some days here to experience a bit of Tierra del Fuego in this region. We'll embark on our expedition ship, crossing over the Drake Passage, and then visiting a number of stops along the Antarctic Peninsula over the sort of 4 to 4.5 days that we will spend in Antarctica before heading back across the Drake Passage to Ushuaia and heading home. So let's go into the program a little bit day by day so I can give you a sense of what all you can expect on this trip. As I say, first of all, we're going to be flying into Buenos Aires. This is kind of a technical stop, but also if you happen to not have visited Buenos Aires before, this is also one of my favorite cities in the world. As I mentioned, there are no nonstop flights from Canada to Argentina at the moment. So typically, if you're coming from Toronto, for example, you'll fly via Sao Paulo. If you're coming from the West Coast, you might fly via Panama, for example, or via Bogota, or via one of the gateways in the U.S. And you'll arrive into Buenos Aires. We pick you up, we bring you downtown, and we spend a night there. There isn't we don't have a lot programmed for Buenos Aires, but undoubtedly we'll gather together, and depending on hosting the trip, I'll give them all my tips on Buenos Aires for great places to eat, particularly if you like steak, because Argentinians are famous for their steak. If you haven't visited Buenos Aires before, I highly suggest that you perhaps fly down a couple of days early, get a feel for the city. As I say, I love it. It's one of my favorite cities in the world. And as I say, it's basically just our gathering point. The following day, after you've had a chance to sort of rest up from the long flight, we will get together and go to the Aeroparque airport. So Buenos Aires has two airports, the Ezeiza, which is the international, and Aeroparque. And we will get on a flight, which is about 3.5 hours to the southern tip of Argentina, Tierra del Fuego, and we'll end up here in Ushuaia, which is the southernmost city in the world, not necessarily the southernmost settlement. There's a bit of an argument between Chile and Argentina about these little villages that exist at the very southern tip of South America, and which one is actually a settlement and a town and a village, and all this discussion. But as far as cities are concerned, Ushuaia, which is not a big city, is the southernmost city in the world. And as you can see by the backdrop here, it is quite an amazing and spectacular place. We'll have the afternoon at leisure. We probably won't end up arriving until sort of early afternoon, and we'll get together and we'll have our welcome dinner here quite aptly in this gateway to Antarctica. We'll spend 3 nights in total in around Ushuaia. We'll have a tour of the city. The city, it was actually declared as a city at the end of the 19th century, and that's a whole story into itself as well, as to why it became designated as a city, and the history and the settlement. As you can imagine, Cape Horn, crossroads between Atlantic and Pacific, a lot of history here, a lot of interesting subjects, not to mention some incredible landscapes and some great food. So we're going to take you out for a great lunch here that's going to feature seafood, but also some specialties such as sort of Patagonian lamb, and then you'll have a bit of free time to sort of explore around. We're also going to take a day in Ushuaia to visit visit Tierra del Fuego National Park. We're going to take the so-called train at the end of the world. So it's a neat little train ride. It's not very long. That is, the furthest south in the world. There's an end of the world post office. As you can imagine, they take advantage of the geographic location to sort of to create all of these interesting attractions. And everything is small scale, but it's what always fascinates me about this part of the world is what people do and how they live in this very, very, very remote environment. So we'll have time and we'll visit the park itself and these wonderful lakes. And as I say, the scenery is just breathtaking. You're going to be in awe the whole time. And the nice thing again as well about all this, about visiting Tierra del Fuego, is the fact that you get to see these mountains, but also all of the forest and the green. Because when we get to Antarctica, you will not see any other green unless, well, I won't tell you what that green comes from, but there are no other trees or shrubs that you're going to find in Antarctica. So you're going to be devoid of that for the entire 10 days that we're at sea. We'll have the morning at leisure of our last day before we embark at on the ship. So it's a nice, relaxing start. And we'll be whisked off to the pier. In fact, our luggage will be sent from the hotel directly to the ship, and it'll be waiting for us in the rooms. And we will embark on this wonderful vessel called the World Explorer. Now, I want to just give you a little bit of context. Why did I decide to go with Quark and this particular ship, the World Explorer? I've been doing Antarctica. I've been organizing trips to Antarctica for 20 years. In fact, the first time I went down there was, it was roughly 20 years ago. I think it was in 2002 or 2003. So I've seen all manner of ships. And there is everything from very sort of rustic Russian icebreakers that have been partially retrofitted and chartered out. And you've got sort of fishing trawler type vessels, and you've got at the other end of the spectrum, ultra luxury cruise ships that go down here that are super sumptuous and nice. What I thought is most appropriate for our way of travel is a ship that has the comforts of an expedition ship that you can expect, and very comfortable, very sumptuous accommodation, but it's still small enough that you have that experience of being on an expedition, right? Some of the programs I've done in the past have been on ships with upwards of 400 people on them. Frankly, I think that's a little bit too much. But at the other end of the spectrum, there are ships that are going that have only 50 people on board. But let me tell you, when you're crossing the Drake Passage, you'll at that point wish that you were on a little bit larger vessel. And I'll get into that in a few minutes. So the World Explorer is quite a modern vessel, purpose-built for Arctic and Antarctic travel. It's got amenities on board that, again, you don't find aboard a lot of the expedition ships. There's a heated pool, there's jacuzzis, there's wonderful dining on board the ship. In fact, you have a buffet breakfast and lunch every day, and a great plated dinner that includes soft drinks and beer and wine for dinner time. And of course, they have coffee and tea around the clock. And they have a great selection of more sort of premium spirits and wines and so on for those connoisseurs who are looking for something. But, even their regular service stuff is a great selection of wines from Argentina, which of course is so famous for its wines. As far as cabins, the World Explorer actually has space for 172 guests and 125 crew. So there's a great crew to guest ratio. All of the cabins on board are outside, and they either have French balconies or full balconies. So we have featured in our program 2 different cabin categories: the veranda suite, which you see here, which is about 20 square meters, plus a small balcony outside that's comfortable enough for 2 people here, as well as the infinity suite, which is a little bit larger at about 25 square meters, about 250 square feet, that has a larger sort of living area and a Juliet balcony. So you might think, is it worth it to have a balcony when you are, traveling in Antarctica? Well, I think it is, because, listen, it's summertime there, which doesn't mean that it's warm. I mean, the temperatures are still going to be, likely at the highs in the low, double digits. So, 10 to 15 degrees. And at the lows, it can drop below freezing. But on a sunny day in Antarctica, breathing the cleanest air that you'll ever breathe at the bottom of the world, it's nice to have a balcony, and you'll see there isn't a huge difference in price. So it's just sort of what your preference is. So I think a wonderful vessel to enjoy this expedition to Antarctica. We'll depart out of Ushuaia and head down, sail down the Beagle Channel, the famous Beagle Channel that is leads the way out from Ushuaia and out past Cape Horn, the southernmost tip of South America, and then across the Drake Passage. And I'll say a few words about the Drake Passage, because this is one of those things that everybody wants to know, what is it like? Because let's face it, we spend roughly 48 hours, depending on wind and sea conditions, to get from Ushuaia to the Antarctic Peninsula or the Shetland Islands. And the Drake Passage, they refer to it in the locals, in the expedition team lingo, as either what they call a Drake Shake or a Drake Lake. So the Drake, which is obviously the connecting point between Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, can have some of the roughest seas in the world. So one has to take that into account. There's no way around it. If you are lucky, you will get a Drake Lake, and you'll have, swells that are sort of, 3 to 5 meters high, which you're going to have always some movement on this ship. So don't think for a second that it's going to be smooth sailing completely. That just doesn't exist in this part of the world and crossing this body of water. In the worst case, you'll have heavier winds, higher swells. I've been in swells that have been easily up to sort of 12 to 15 meters. So very, very large. It's quite an experience. And so one, as I say, has to take that into account. There are all kinds of remedies that you can use to combat motion sickness, depending on whether you have it to a lesser or a greater degree. And I've been on crossings where, half the ship have been below deck because they just weren't able to come out and enjoy dinner or anything. So that is the reality. And I realize that's not really a selling point per se, but I think that there is something special to actually saying you've accomplished crossing the Drake Passage. It's a rite of passage in the world of travelers, and I think that it's amazing, and it's to be out there. For me, is really one of the most incredible experiences. If you're lucky, you'll see wildlife. Humpback whales are often in the area. All kinds of seabirds out in the middle of sea. It's quite remarkable. Along the way, of course, there are lectures every day, morning and afternoon, on all manner of topics relating to the Antarctica as a whole, the continent, the glaciology, the wildlife. So it's a very informed time, and it's part of the experience of going to Antarctica. So as I say, we'll spend 48 hours, up to 48 hours getting to Antarctica. We'll typically arrive on the second day of the crossing sometime in the afternoon. And at that point, we'll pull into a sort of a sheltered bay and have an opportunity to do some stand-up paddleboarding to get out on the sea. This is an extra excursion. It's not included in the main program. There's a couple of things you can do: sea kayaking and sit on top kayaking, as well as stand-up paddling. And again, it's like, when are you ever going to have the opportunity in your life to stand up paddle on the Antarctic Ocean? So a great introduction, a great way to get into Antarctica. We will then spend 4 full days exploring Antarctica and all the stuff that there is to see. So as I mentioned at the outset, the stops that we will make will be between the South Shetland Islands and the Antarctic Peninsula, so the mainland, the main continent itself. There are numerous points of discovery, so points where they can pull in and where we can go ashore. I think that in total, the IATO, which is the International Association of Antarctic Tour Operators, has in their directory about 100. There's probably about 20 of those that are the most common and that every single ship visits. So I think this is an important point about, if you thought about Antarctica and you've looked perhaps at other companies that offer the programs there, the insider tip is that pretty much everybody goes to the same places. Longer trips can go to more places, but once, by the time you've spent sort of 4.5 days in Antarctica, you will have a great sense of what the continent is all about, even though you'll see only a teeny little bit of it, but you will see some of the most amazing parts of it. There are places like Sierra Cove and Lemaire Channel, which I'll show you a picture of in a second, where you will get the vastness of the mountains, the glaciers that calve off into the sea. Whether you see it or not obviously depends on the weather conditions. You'll often see wildlife in all the rest of these places. You'll also visit places, as I say, you'll go through these incredibly serene environments like the Lemaire Channel, which is one of the most photographed in Antarctica for a reason that this picture barely does it sort of justice. This is the kind of place where there'll be the opportunity to do sea kayaking or sit atop kayaking or stand up paddling. And as I say, it's an incredible experience. Any activity that you do that has you leaving the ship requires that you have these waterproof pants that they will prescribe that you have, just frankly, because it's important to be obviously properly dressed to go out in and around Antarctica. There are between 1 and 2 excursions every day as you're cruising around Antarctica. Those excursions could be to places like research bases. There's a whole bunch of research bases in the Antarctic Peninsula. Like, for example, this one, this is Almirante Brown, which belongs to Argentina, as you can tell by the Argentinian flag there. So depending on a number of different factors. So we mention in our programming, and as does the ship, we could stop at any of these places. And where we actually stop is dependent on numerous factors, ultimately decided by the captain. Sea and weather conditions are a big factor, not to mention the fact that when you cruise around Antarctica, they organize themselves, all of the ships that are cruising down there, so that they try not to cross paths. So you feel like you have the continent to yourself. And you feel like when you arrive at some of these bases like Port Lockroy or Almirante Brown, and you walk inside and you see these researchers who live here partly all year round, and they greet you like they haven't seen anybody in 6 months or a year. And it's a remarkable experience. And again, part of the different things that we do. We also will see a variety of wildlife when we're in Antarctica. Penguins, of course, first and foremost. There are at least 4 species of penguins that we will see in various rookeries at the different stops. So penguins, by the time you get to the end of the 4 days, you'll be almost sick of them. You'll see so many, but they are phenomenal creatures. I mean, we've all seen movies like Happy Feet, where you get a sense of what life of the penguins is, but to actually see them in this environment is remarkable. The fur seals, which are super cute, the Weddell seals, humpback whales. The last trip that I made to Antarctica, which was in 2017, compared to the first trip that I made to Antarctica, which was, as I mentioned, back in about 2003, there was such an increase in the number of whales. We had so many sightings during the 10 days aboard ship that I felt a sense that we were heading in the right direction, even though, globally speaking, environmentally speaking, not necessarily, but I had a very positive impression based on all the wildlife that I saw on my last trip down there. Some of the stops will be simply to landing sites where they have various wildlife, like here on Peterman Island, for example, or Yankee Harbor or Nico Harbor. Again, each place has its own special reason for going there. What'll happen is you'll disembark the ship by a zodiac. The zodiacs hold roughly 10 people. One other reason why I like this ship and this program and the way that they're organized, the IATO, which is the body that governs tourism in Antarctica, stipulates that no ship may disembark more than 100 passengers on land at any one time. So in other words, they don't want more than 100 people on shore. Everything about operating in Antarctica is all about the environment, sustainability. They make sure that your shoes are clean before you leave the ship to go onto shore. Your boots, that is, they check you as well. You're not allowed to take as much as a pebble off the beach. And this is really important because, you'll see when you get there what a pristine environment it is and how important it is that it is preserved. And I must say the guys at Quark, as with most companies, do a pretty damn good job of making sure that that the sustainability measures and the environmental protection measures are taken very, very seriously. You can sort of see here a picture. This is sort of a classic penguin rookery sort of towards the end of the season. What I wanted to mention as well is in terms of the timing of the year, we are going at the end of January. This is the peak of the summer season. Obviously, the summer solstice in the Southern Hemisphere is December the 21st. So we're about a month after that. It means long days. So we have daylight, not 24 hours a day, because we're still well north of the Antarctic Circle. Most ships can't navigate much beyond or even close to the Antarctic Circle because of the ice conditions. So we're well north of the Antarctic Circle. We have long days. We have relatively warm weather by Arctic or Antarctic standards. And in this time of the year, what I like about it is the fact that you're far enough into the season that you can go to the places that they want to bring you to. For excursions that go earlier in the season, they start sailing in Antarctica already in the end of November and December. The benefit of early season is the furry penguin chicks, but it also means that a lot of the channels are blocked by icebergs still, and so they are limited in the stops that they can make. Whereas by the time you get to the end of January, most of the place is cleared up. It also means that there's not usually as much precipitation. So the penguin rookeries are a bit dirty. You saw the previous picture that I showed you here from penguins sort of doing their business all over the place. The smell is something you will also never forget, part of the experience of Antarctica, but it's more likely to look like this than to look like this at that time of the year. But you just never know, because you could get a fresh snowfall. And in some places, you're going to be walking on sort of gravel or sort of like a tundra-like. But for the most part, it'll be sort of snow and so on. So, good boots are essential. You generally spend around an hour on shore. It's kind of free flow with the wandering around. The expedition leaders will have already briefed you in advance of every stop about what the location is, what there is to see, where you can go, where you can't go, and you just take it all in. It's an incredible experience, and particularly a fun one to do with a group, because you'll know other people. And the last time I was there, sort of we cracked out some champagne and drank it on shore, and we had a little bit of a celebration and lots of laughs, and it was a lot of fun. So there's lots to see and do. We've described some of the stops in our program itinerary, but as I say, there's actually a whole host that they could choose from, and no matter what, you're going to have an incredible time. So towards the end of the trip, one of the stops that they usually make is Deception Island, which is one of the more famous or well-known islands in the South Shetland Islands. It's a sort of a semicircular island that is actually a volcanic crater. And they often, either on the way down or on the way back to Ushuaia, will stop in here. This is where you have the chance to do a polar plunge. So they give everybody the chance to actually jump in to the Antarctica Ocean. I've done it myself. It's quite an experience. And Deception Island, because it's volcanic, has actually hot ash just under the surface. So it used to be that they would dig holes and allow seawater to pour in and make a little hot tub for you to jump into. But I'm not sure how it is these days, because again, the environmental and the sustainable measures that they're taking mean that some activities that were possible years ago may no longer be possible. But you'll definitely get the chance to jump into the water. I certainly promise you that. And so we'll have our 48-hour crossing back across the Drake, hoping to see whales along the way. There's a very good chance that we'll see whales along the way, and hoping that the seas aren't too terribly rough. But then again, it's all part of the adventure, all part of the excitement of visiting Antarctica. And then we'll end up back in Ushuaia, and we'll disembark the ship and have another sort of a half a day free and a farewell evening where we'll all celebrate and share our pictures if we didn't already do so, and send them back home, because most people aren't going to bother with the ship's satellite internet system, and they'll wait till they get on shore to be able to share some of their pictures with everybody back home, and a final night in Ushuaia. And then we'll make our way out and fly from Ushuaia back typically via Buenos Aires back to Canada. And I share a couple of quick memories. This is from my last trip in 2017. So you get a little bit of the sense firsthand. I was there. I've seen it. I've been twice. And I'll tell you, it is like no other place in the world. If it is not on your bucket list, it ought to be. As I say, the only reason you would not go to Antarctica, from my perspective, is if you were if you just were not able to handle the crossing that Drake Passage on a ship. But I encourage you to give it a whirl. It's quite an experience. So let me take you through some of the details of the trip. Of course, everything is listed in our program itinerary and the ancillary documents, such as the additional information, where we sort of spell out a lot of the frequently asked questions. This program, priced in Canadian dollars, going to Antarctica obviously is not cheap. But again, in terms of value for money, I think that Quark are the best game to go on. In fact, their chief expedition leader is an old friend of mine, a Canadian fellow. I've known him for many, many years. He has worked on many of the different ships. And in fact, was one of the reasons why I picked Quark, because I think they're one of the most, how should we say, one of the most experienced, one of the most professional operators in the region. And that's really, really important when you are investing this kind of money to go on this trip. Inclusions on this. So we obviously have the cruise itself, which is 10 nights aboard the World Explorer, as I mentioned, with all the meals and beverages and so on that are included during the meals. We also have this pre-program, which is a night in Buenos Aires, a chance to gather together, the domestic flight, the 3 nights in Ushuaia, the touring around, and all the rest of it, as well as a night at the end. So it makes it an all-around program that gives you a chance to sort of enjoy a little bit more than just Antarctica itself, and knowing that everything is taken care of for you. The only thing, of course, that you need to look after, or we can assist you in looking after, is obviously your airfare. So I should just double reinforce here. We include the domestic airfare one way from Buenos Aires to Ushuaia. On the way back, because most people will likely fly directly back home, we don't include that leg. So that way you can book your ticket from Ushuaia back to, Toronto, Montreal, Vancouver, as the case may be, and ensure that your luggage gets checked all the way through. So that's the rationale for that. As well, there's some additional activities that you can do, like sea kayaking and paddling and so on, that are extra, and of course trip cancellation and medical insurance. But I will mention that evacuation insurance is part of the program. So there's a $500,000 evacuation policy. God forbid anything should happen, but I've seen it where they've flown in and taken somebody off a ship by helicopter who had a more serious medical problem. So the beauty is that Antarctic travel is so commonplace is maybe an overstatement, but it's there's enough of it going on now that there are great safety measures in place by the ships themselves, and generally speaking among the community that's down there. So I think that's important to know. If you join us early, we're able to pass on some savings to you that we get from some of the hotels by booking and putting our deposits in early. So sign up early. I think this trip will be quite popular. We've had a number of people ask about it for quite some time, and people waiting obviously for the right opportunity and the right group of people to go with, and I think that's really important, because you're going to be sharing quarters and sharing a lot of laughs. Not sharing quarters, I mean, obviously you have your own cabin, but I mean you'll be sharing a ship and a lot of laughs. And given that Quark is marketing their programs internationally, it's also nice to know you got a group of Canadians to travel with, because that makes the whole thing a lot of fun. So time for questions and answers. If you do have any questions, please do write them in the chat box. And I think some may have come in already. But of course, if you have questions that are specific to your own circumstance, or you're interested in booking, please do drop Paula or Barb a note, and they will be more than happy to answer any questions that you have. But for now, we'll take any questions. So Paula,
Yes.
I know we can, but I can hear you.
I'm here. So Ardell was asking to clarify, did you mention that you had also gone in January?
Yes, I've been twice. Both times that I went were roughly the same time. I went once in mid-February, and I went once in late January beginning, so roughly the same time as this trip. And both were similar experience in terms of weather, in terms of what we saw. We did some different stops on both trips that I did. And as I say, the first one was 20 years ago. So it was there was a lot less travel to Antarctica than there is now.
Definitely. I had a member asking here with regards to like weather. There was mention under the exclusions of, you know, proper clothing and waterproof pants. Can you touch on like what they should be prepared for in that realm?
We've got a whole list of what you need to pack. Let's put it this way. Antarctica in January is typically warmer than most places in Canada in January. So that's one thing. We kind of had, I remember we had on both trips that I went, we had a lot of laughs about, you know, looking at the temperatures like, oh, it's 12 degrees here. What's it like in Toronto? Oh, it's, you know, it's minus 10. So consider the weather in Antarctica at this time of the year, kind of like what the weather would be like in March and April at home. So it could be easily in the low double digits during the day, depending whether the sun shines or not. And at night, you know, it's typically in the low single digits or maybe even a few degrees below zero. It's not bone chilling Arctic cold. It's not minus 20. This is the peak of summer, and we are at a relatively high latitude if you compare it to the Arctic, for example. So you need winter wear. You need layers like you do on most of our trips, because you can get definitely a wind. If the sea is rough, there's also can be a spray. So it's important to have, you know, that kind of sort of waterproof outerwear, and then thin layers, thin you know, undergarments, the kind of stuff again that you would wear if you were going to, you know, on a nice March day in you know, Ontario or Quebec, or for that matter in the prairie provinces. If you were going around, that's kind of what to expect. Things like sunglasses are really important. Sun hat. You don't realize how strong the sun is. You think, oh well, I'm in the Antarctic, but it's still remarkably strong. So that's quite important. And again, we do provide, or Quark provides, a great winter sort of a parka type thing. So you actually don't need to bring a jacket with you. You'll just have to bring one back with you. It's a great souvenir of the trip. But at the same time, you can get away with one suitcase with 23 kilograms of luggage, or whatever it is that they typically allow. I had no problem, as did most people on the trip, accommodating into that. There is laundry available, obviously, for a charge on board the ship if you do need to get things, but it's casual. I mean, maybe it's not obvious, but it is a casual experience. Hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think that's perfect. And you touched on the parka, which I think is a great piece as well for people to know.
For sure.
Yeah, good wool layers. And they provide you with the proper gear to get out and do some of those extra added activities like the sea kayaking and sup paddle. Comfortably.
Exactly. Whatever additional things that you would need to enjoy that activity properly. And considering that the water is obviously chilly. So other than the polar plunge for those that opt, they generally want to keep you out of the water.
Yeah, definitely. I don't have any other questions that have come into me right now. So okay, members can reach out to Barb and I to gather more specifics. We'd be happy to hear from you.
Yep, we'd be thrilled to hear from you. This is an amazing trip. Drop us a note if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to know. As I say, I've been twice. So if you know, if Paul or Barb don't have the answer right away, it's always between myself and our team. We can always get the answer to you. This is a really once in a lifetime trip. I'm super fortunate that I went twice. I would go back again tomorrow. I loved it. It is really something that one, as a citizen of this planet, one needs to see these extreme regions and do it in a way, and do it in a little bit of style and a little bit of comfort. And that's the way that we're doing it. So I hope you'll join us. Thanks for joining the webinar. We got a few more webinars coming up before the holidays get going. We've got Andalusia next week, Spain. And I think we've got, there's a couple, I think there's a couple other things. So just look out for the newsletter this weekend. And we'll have a list of all of our upcoming webinars. Take care in the meantime. Thanks again for joining us.
Can I interrupt? Sorry, Gordon. We have a really good question that just came in from Robin asking if there's any other trips on either end of this that will connect.
There are not. So yeah, we do have a trip to Argentina and Chile, but it's later in the year because it doesn't start till March. And we thought about, so there aren't any other trips that connect, unfortunately. Just because the drawback to February in Argentina is that that's the peak of school holidays. So it's kind of manic down there. That's part of the reason why we're only spending a night in Buenos Aires. is because it's not otherwise an ideal time to travel in Argentina. So sadly, there isn't anything else to combine it with. That doesn't preclude you, though, from doing that and from going to see Buenos Aires. It is peak summer, and it's a very busy time of the year, but that's not to say you shouldn't see it.
We're not planning the South America hiking program that we had put out for 2020.
Paul, I'll have to get back to you on that one because
Okay, sorry.
Not on my list.
Okay. Not at the moment, Robin, but yeah, like Gordon said, not something or something you can definitely still extend of your own.
Most definitely. If you're in that part of the world, it's great. And there's lots of things that you can do. Good. Well, thanks again. Take care, everyone. And we'll catch up to you on an upcoming webinar. Have yourselves a great rest of the day. Bye-bye.